Hey everyone. I haven't had a whole lot of time to check this out or to make sure that everything is working good, but I'm hoping that it comes through okay. And I think that for probably many of you, it definitely looks a little weird because we're not at church. We're actually in one of the back bedrooms at the house here trying to get things ready. We are in the wake of Hurricane Milton. And let's see here. Sorry, guys. Trying to get you squared away a little bit if I can. All right. I think we're okay now. I am hoping that the sound and everything is okay, but I know that many of you weren't expecting for us to come here today and have a message tonight. We canceled service this evening because we're like in the wake, legitimately in the eye pathway of Hurricane Milton. And I hope that all of you are safe, that you finalized all of your preparations as we battle the worst portions of the storm this evening. In light of what we were going through here in Florida, I'm reminded of a story that I think that some of you guys are going to think maybe cliche, but I find amazingly on point, especially for what we're encountering right now. It's the story of the disciples following Jesus into a storm. And if you allow me a few moments for tonight, I think this is going to be a great opportunity for some encouragement this evening. If you have your Bibles with you and you want to get those out and follow along, awesome. If not, I'm going to read to you from the NIV tonight, and we're going to be in Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. And here's what it says. It says, "That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along. Just as he was in the boat, there were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him up and said, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drowned?' And he got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, 'Quiet, be still.' The wind died down, and it was completely calm." Pretty awesome, huh? He said to the disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith at all?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." Awesome story, huh? Awesome story. It's relatively simple, right? But it's also powerful. And I'd like for us to take a look for a couple of observations, if you will, for tonight. I wanted to say this, that as I'm reading through this story and we're sitting in the midst of Hurricane Milton, it just seems so vivid. It makes things a whole lot realer, a whole lot more real. If you're sitting in the middle of a similar situation and the wind is howling outside, the rain is coming down, we're under tornado watches, and it's kind of crazy. And for whatever reason, storms have got a way of igniting some of our sharpest emotions. I think that one of the most notable is fear. Now, fear is a basic emotion. And according to some of the definitions that I found via some dictionaries online, it says that fear is an emotional response to a perceived threat or danger. And I've got some information here as well. It says it triggers the body's fight or flight response, leading to physiological changes like increased heart rate, adrenaline levels, which in many cases is normal and most times helpful. When you get into a life or death situation, you have to be on your toes, right? Your eyes have to be picking up every little detail. You need to be on edge a little bit to help you kind of do that. But when fear grows, when it continues to grow, especially when you're in a life-threatening situation, and when it is left unchecked, I will tell you that it tends to lead to panic. According to Merriam-Webster's definition, panic is a sudden, unreasoning terror, often accompanied by mass flight. I just want you to know that chaos ensues when panic takes over. No longer are you doing things that are productive. No longer are you in a position where you're kind of looking at all of the dangerous situations around you or doing things that are going to help you get out of that dangerous situation. But now you kind of step into this place of panic, and panic kind of takes over. As it does, what you find is that no longer are you rationally thinking. You're just kind of doing whatever kind of comes to mind in those moments. And many times it's not helpful. It's not leading to anybody else's benefit or blessing. In fact, a lot of times it creates more problems. According to Psychology Today, panic is actually, or at least anxiety, is contagious. And I think that many of you guys have experienced that too. If you think about that today, like if you've ever been in a difficult situation where things kind of ensued really quickly, when you see one person start to panic, what is the general result of the other people that are around them? Well, they tend to panic too. Their heart rate starts to increase. They start to kind of think, oh no, what am I going to do? And I've seen instances where people have trampled over other people because of the panic that was ensuing all around them. I know that we've seen all kinds of things where people just stop using their brains, it seems like. And when panic ensues, the result is devastation many times. And it's crazy. And it seems like when you're in a group setting, it's worse, right? When people panic in a group, it tends to spread. And this is exactly what is happening on this boat in the middle of this story that we just read in Mark chapter 4. Did you happen to see how the disciples approached Jesus? They are screaming, right? They're frantic. They are in panic mode. You can tell by the words that they use to get Jesus' attention, right? They come in screaming and yelling, Jesus, don't you care that we're getting ready to die? We're going to drown. This is horrible. The wind and the waves are going on and it's coming over the sides of the boat and we're going to sink and this is going to be the end for us, right? I mean, they are in full-blown panic mode. They had passed the point of healthy fear, right? They weren't in this position where they were doing anything productive. They had done, I think, what they knew to do. And now they were holding on for dear life. And when things started to get worse, they started to panic. And this was their last chance of something. In fact, I'm not even sure by their response and the things that I see in the end that they knew what they were doing when they went to Jesus. They knew that he was the master. They knew that he was down there sleeping. And they went in to wake him up. And they're like, man, we're getting ready to die. And I guess they just wanted to be with him when they went down, maybe. I don't know what it was, because their response when Jesus does something about the storm doesn't match them having trust or faith in him that he was going to fix the situation. I think that they were just looking for some comfort and another friend to go down on the ship with. It's just crazy. They had passed this place of healthy fear. They were no longer thinking straight. They were no longer in this position where they could do anything productive, but they were in straight up panic mode. They had given into this unconstrained, I think, craziness. In contrast to that, though, do you happen to see Jesus? Did you notice where Jesus was in this whole ordeal? He's sleeping on a pillow in the hull of the ship. Now, I've got to say this because I've been in the hull of a ship. I've been in rough seas. And when you're in the middle of a storm, I have no idea how Jesus was sleeping. I was thinking about it, maybe just a little bit of a side note that we can hold on to here. Something, that maybe most people didn't know about Jesus. Here it is. Jesus was a very, very heavy sleeper. Because if he was able to sleep in the hull of the boat while the ship is going up and down the waves and the wind is beating this thing to pieces where the other people think that they're going to be dying, man, he certainly had to be a pretty sound sleeper. Amen? I'm telling you. It's crazy that he was, but it also says something about Jesus's worry level. Don't you think? Like, you think about that. How worried could Jesus have been if he was down there and sound asleep through all of that? When we kind of step back, what we realize is that he wasn't worried at all. He, in fact, it seemed like the storm had no effect on him. It had no power over him. In fact, it was just the opposite, wasn't it? He gets up from this dead sleep after his disciples come in screaming and yelling, all frantic and panicked, right? And he rebukes the storm. This is probably my favorite part of this little story. It's almost like he got up and said, all right, that's enough. I'm tired of this. You guys need to settle down. I felt like it's almost like he's talking to the storm like two little children in the back seat of the car, right? He's like, hey, if you two don't settle down, I'm going to come back there. That's enough. Be quiet. And the storm responded like one of those little kids. It was crazy to me. It settled down immediately. I remember as a young child that when my dad pulled out his grown-up voice, I called it his mean voice. Like I know all of you have experienced this. Maybe it was your mom or your dad or whatever, but they get on that big voice and they would say, like, for me, it was like the whole name, Jason Oscar Diaz. If the middle name came out, you were in trouble. But you know what, when you got that stern voice and it came at you, and especially when it was my dad, it didn't matter what you were doing in that moment. If the big voice came out, you stopped right then. Whatever it is that you were doing, and you paid attention, you zipped your lips, you were ready, you were in position. And I feel like that storm did exactly that for Jesus. When he spoke up, it stopped. It said, all right, that's it. We're not doing anything else. It obeyed him. It was awesome. This storm responded just like I would have responded to my dad. And it said, yes, sir. And it followed orders. Then Jesus turns his attention from the storm to his disciples. And he says this, what in the world were you thinking? Why are you so afraid? Why are you in this panic state? Why are you so frantic? And as he's looking at them, he's saying, don't you trust me? Don't you know who I am? I'm sitting here in the boat with you. Do you think I'd let anything happen to you? And I know I'm elaborating a little bit here, but he says, don't you have any faith? Don't you trust me at all? Man, it's crazy to me because Jesus was like, do you even have a reason to be afraid? And he rebukes that storm, and look at how the disciples respond. And this is part of the reason why I don't think that they really got it. I don't think that they knew what they were going through or what they were handling, or what they were in the presence of in these moments. In fact, when they woke Jesus up from the bottom of the ship, I don't think that they were anticipating that he was going to be able to do anything at all. I think they had just made up their minds that this was it. The disciples look at each other in verse 41, and it says they were terrified. Now listen, I don't know how scared they were when the storm was raging on and they came out to get Jesus. I know that they were pretty frightened. They were in panic mode and they were screaming for their lives, right? And yet the response here in verse 41 says that after Jesus calmed the storm, they were terrified. And they asked each other, who is this, that even the wind and the waves obey him? That statement just makes it sound like they were more afraid after Jesus calmed the storm than when they were going through the storm. And I think it was in that moment that some of their eyes were opened to the power and the authority that Jesus holds over this world. I think they got a new glimpse. I think that some of them, not only were their eyes open, but their hearts were open, that this man is more than just a man, that he is something greater, something bigger. He's something special. And I know that today that this is a pretty familiar story. And I think that sometimes it's easy for us to kind of push things aside because it's something that we've heard. But I want to share a couple of things that I feel are really important for us to know today, right now. And I don't just mean right here in Florida for those of us that are going through the hurricane today, but I also mean any of you who might be joining us today who are going through some kind of storm in your life. I want you to know that God's word doesn't just hold some historical value. It isn't just a good book to read to get some pretty interesting stories out of, although both of those things are true. I want you to know that God's word has practical and applicable items for today in every area of our lives. So I want to share with you just a couple of observations, if I can. And here's the first one. We have got to learn from this particular passage as if we were the disciples. And one of the things that I think that Jesus is pointing out to them is this, is that we shouldn't leave our fear unchecked. And so that's point number one. Don't leave fear unchecked. We, much like the disciples, tend to let fear get the better of us. When we experience difficult seasons, when we're going through the storms of life, we tend to fixate on all of the negative. Listen, here's what I mean. We see the waves crashing over the boat, right? And we see it filling it up. We feel the wind pelting us in the face, and it's rocking the boat. And all of those things are right there before us. And so our minds begin to run rampant with the thoughts of what if the boat tips over? What if it gets so full that it sinks? What if we drown? And we get into these places where we do the same kind of things in our lives. Well, what if the doctor calls? And what if we get a bad report? What if I lose my job? What if I don't have enough money? What if I tithe and then I can't make my bill? I mean, we just go to the what if ends of the world. Our minds run rampant with those things, and we go straight to the worst case scenarios. And here's what I'm telling you is that if we leave our fear unchecked, it will almost undoubtedly result in panic. And when we panic, we lose the ability to reason. We act irrationally, and many times we can hurt ourselves or even others in that state. So today, when facing a storm in life, don't let fear run wild. Keep it in check. And remember this, that a little bit of fear, there's a healthy place of fear. In fact, we're told to fear the Lord, right? And it's a healthy respect to know who God is and what he is about and his power, his authority, his ability. And so there's a healthy place of fear. And so I'm not just saying, hey, never be afraid of anything, because I think a little bit is good for us. Healthy fear is productive. It helps us to have the right frame of mind. And like even in the hurricane, like I don't think that we should say, oh, well, there's a big hurricane coming and, God's got it. It's under control. So we don't need to board up. We don't need to get supplies. We don't need to do anything because he's going to take care of it. I don't think that that's rational thinking. I think that what fear does is it helps us to make preparations. It helps us to deal with the situations and, yes, maybe be a little bit on edge, but have our eyes open to things that could potentially cause problems. And it helps us to take positive actions to do what needs to be done. And so I want to say this to you: do what you can do safely, but don't let fear run out of control. And now some of you are probably thinking, well, that's a great point, Pastor Jason. And I want to do that. And I think healthy fear is good. But what do you mean by keeping fear in check? Like, how do you even check your fear? I think that that's a lot easier said than done, because when you're in the heat of the moment, when everything is going wrong, it's easy for, everything else to kind of take over and take control. So you make a good point, Pastor Jason, but that's easier said than done. How do I actually keep my fear in check? And I say, man, you're asking good questions. You're asking good questions. And I'm glad you asked, because the answer to that is in my second observation. Point number 2 is take it to Jesus. How do you keep your fear in check? Well, you just load it all up and you take it to Jesus. Now, I think the disciples waited a little bit too long. Did you notice where they were when they were panicking? They were out on the deck. They were trying to keep things under control. Things are going crazy. But when it got out of hand and when things were outside of their control, when they man, I don't know what else to do, where did they go? They went to Jesus. And I don't even know if they went in with the right intentions. They probably went in with the wrong idea, but they still went to the right place. And I'm telling you today that no matter what storm you're facing or how bad your situation is, I don't care how bad or how bleak the outcome may appear to be, the right place to go in the midst of the storm is to Jesus. Plain and simple. How do I know that Jesus is the right place to go? That's another good question. Man, you guys are on top of it today. It's probably because you're locked inside during the storm and you don't have anywhere else to go or anything else to do. So you're thinking of good things here, good responses. How do I know that Jesus is the right place to go? Because I see from Scripture and everything that I've experienced in my life that Jesus can handle it. That's number 3. Are you getting these here today? Number 2 was take it to Jesus. And number 3, I think you need to take it to Jesus because Jesus can handle it. Plain and simple. Look how he responds to this storm. He isn't surprised by it. He isn't caught off guard by it, right? He isn't sitting over there wringing out his hands in worry. He isn't scared of the storm that's there. He's like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And now he's holding on to the side rails of the boat thinking we're all going to die, right? He doesn't come back out and scream with the disciples either. He isn't surprised. He isn't caught off guard. He isn't scared. In fact, he simply spoke into the circumstances and things changed. That's awesome, isn't it? The disciples didn't recognize it before this moment, but I want to share with you this little insight. Maybe you picked up on it today, but here it is. Jesus has power and authority over our circumstances. Listen, he can speak, and in an instant, things can change. Isn't that true? In my experience, that is the truth. And it's the same for you today. Whether you're facing a hurricane like we are here in Florida today, or you're facing some devastating storm in your life, these observations ring true for you as well. Listen, God isn't surprised by your situation. It didn't catch him off guard. He's not sitting up in heaven going, oh my goodness, I never saw this coming. He's not wringing out his hands in heaven saying, I don't know what I'm going to do about this. Oh, this is just a horrible situation. This is just really bad. It didn't catch him off guard. It hasn't surprised him. In fact, he isn't even scared by it, even if you are. Maybe you're looking at this thing, you're thinking it's huge, it's so overwhelming, it's so big, I don't even know what to do. You know what? God doesn't have the same sentiment. He's not scared by your situation. He already has a plan in place. He already knows what needs to be done. In fact, he simply need speak into your circumstance and things can change. Isn't that awesome today? Man, I don't know about you, but for me, that's encouraging to know that regardless of what my situation is, regardless of what my circumstances, God isn't caught off guard. It hasn't caught him by surprise. He isn't scared. And he already has a plan to fix it. And I know that he has the power and the authority to do whatever is necessary. In fact, in just a moment, he could change my circumstance. You know what? I believe that wholeheartedly today, that if he so decided, and he said today to that hurricane, be quiet, be still, that's enough, that it would dissipate right now out in the ocean the way that it is, and it would stop completely. You know, that's reassuring to me to know that my God has got that kind of power and that kind of authority within just his words. But maybe here's the more troubling issue. Maybe this is the more troubling question today. What if God doesn't miraculously remove the storm? As much as I know that he's capable of stopping this wind and these rains and the tornadoes and everything else that's associated with this hurricane, what if he doesn't decide to remove it? What if he doesn't decide to remove the storm in your life? That thing that you're going through and that you're dealing with, that you're struggling with, that maybe is causing you fear and panic even in your life right now. What if he decides not to remove that? And I think that's an important question. I really do, because it's a possibility, isn't it? That he may not remove the storm at all. He may want you to weather it. He may want you to ride it out. But I want to draw your attention to something that I think many people miss in this passage of Mark. I'm going to ask you a question again, and I want you to think it through for just a moment. Did you notice where Jesus was when the storm hit? Some of you are thinking, Pastor Jason, you already asked us that. He's sleeping in the hull of the boat on a pillow, right? In the middle of the storm. We already answered that. That's correct. But I want you to know that you missed something right in that little statement. Even in your answer, you missed something. You see, what I wanted you to understand in that question, asking it a second time, is something that I think that many of us just walk right by and don't even think about. Here's what I want to tell you. He wasn't just in the hull of the boat sleeping. He was with his disciples in the storm. You see, he was on the boat with them. He was riding out the same storm that they were in with them. I don't know about you, but that does something for me. That's something that I think is noteworthy. We can't just walk past it. We can't just not see it. We can't just say that he was sleeping down below. I'm telling you that he was there with them in the midst of the storm. Jesus may choose to not miraculously remove the storm from your life. He may not deter Milton from coming this way. He may have the eye wall come through right here in Lakeland where we are. And there is a real possibility that we're going to see that today. But he's going to be right here with us through it. He's going to be right there with you through whatever storm it is that you're facing. And that brings me to point number 4, and this is really what we're going to close with today, is that he's going to see you through it. You see, Jesus may not choose to miraculously remove the storm, but he's going to see you through it. So whether it's a hurricane, like Hurricane Milton, or some other storm that you're dealing with in your life, I want you to take these observations to heart. Here's the 4 of them real quickly, close together so that you've got them all. Don't leave your fear unchecked. Take it to Jesus so that you can keep it under control, because he can handle it. That's number 3. And then he'll see you through it. Guys, my prayers are with you. All of us that are here in Florida facing this storm together, we're praying for your safety and that you're going to not only see us through on the other side, but that things are going to be okay and workable because the Lord is going to see you through it. And for those of you today that maybe are looking at this from a little bit different perspective, and you're saying to yourselves today, I'm dealing with a personal storm in my life, I want to just give you the same advice. Don't leave fear unchecked in your life. Take it to Jesus. Let him handle it, and then he'll see you through it. Guys, today, we love you to pieces. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you here in just the next couple of days. Have a great night. We love you.